Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover, an NBA channel where I'll be breaking down different teams, players, draft prospects, and much more. The first series on this channel will be a breakdown of each team's previous season, as well as covering their off-season goals and what each team needs to do to take a next step forward in their development. Whether that be just beginning the early stages of a rebuild, or teams looking to take that next step as a championship contender. And I will be going through each team by record, last season's record. So we will be starting with teams with the worst record and building our way up all the way to the teams with the best record. The first team that we will be covering is the Houston Rockets, as they finished with the league's worst record last year at 17-55. Although the season was definitely clouded by the James Harden trade, there were definitely some bright spots which we will get into. But to first cover the James Harden trade, Houston is definitely at a decent spot at the beginning stages of their rebuild, with some of the young pieces that they have. But they could have set themselves up so much better, right? When you look at what they could have got for James Harden, right? You look at what the Lakers got for, you look at what the Pelicans got for Anthony Davis, right? They got and the young All-Star, they got young valuable pieces as well as draft picks. The Rockets only succeeded in getting draft picks, and considering that Kyrie, Harden, and KD all like each other, I doubt that they're going to leave after next year. So who knows how valuable those picks are going to be. And they really didn't get any young players back, which is kind of mind-boggling. They chose Victor Oladipo over Caris LeVert. And then they proceeded to trade Victor Oladipo for Kelly Olynyk and Avery Bradley. So I'm not really sure what the whole deal was there. They could have acquired a blue chip young prospect like Ben Simmons. Now, calling Ben Simmons a blue chip prospect right after the playoff series that he just had might stir some people the wrong way. But, an all-star caliber player, a young player in Ben Simmons, they could have acquired a Tyler Hero in Miami, as well as, pick your prospect down in Miami with, Precious Achiuwa. Maybe even a Duncan Robinson, and maybe some picks. Who knows? But they could have set themselves up so much better, and they just didn't. They made this rebuild a lot harder than it had to be. This could have been a very quick rebuild if you look at it on paper. If you add a Ben Simmons, Tyler Hero again to the core that they have, along with the number 2 pick in the draft that they have this year. Going on to the young players this year, which alleviated some of the pain. Kevin Porter Jr., ultra talented player, right? Been a big fan of him all the way going back to high school. It's just so smooth. James Harden-esque with that size and that skill set, right? Very shifty lefty. Shifty lefty. He's very talented. Very, very, very talented. Star potential, right? Star potential. I thought he was a top 10 player back in the 2019 draft. He fell due to off-court issues. He posted suicidal messages on Instagram last year in Cleveland. He's had issues everywhere he's gone off the court. Will he solve it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, you'd like to hope so, but it seems like, I don't know. He seems like he's just got a lot of mental stuff. We're all pulling for him. I'm pulling for him extremely. I love Kevin Porter Jr. I've known about him for years now. I'm a big fan of his. I hope he puts it together because, man, is he fun to watch on the floor. He was not efficient from three-point at all this last season. But, the difficulty of shots that he was taking, I think, was a large part of that rather than, how good of a shooter is he really. And I think with more experience in the NBA and just basketball experience in general, right, he didn't play his full season at USC. He didn't really play that much in Cleveland. The minutes they did get, he came off the bench. And he was in a tanking situation last year in Houston, right? So in a winning environment, more pieces around him, more talent, more space, more time to, learn the NBA game. I'm sure that he'll get better at those shots because he's capable of hitting those shots. He's that level of talent. On the defensive end, it is what it is. He's really just a scorer. He's got a big body on the defensive end, but I'm not expecting him to be some stopper or really even a positive. I'm expecting him to go out there and one day give you 25 points per game. And he has intriguing playmaking abilities. Definitely an intriguing facilitator for the Rockets. He could play point guard sometimes. I definitely would play him at point guard. He's just that level. He just has that high of an IQ. I think he was especially intriguing in the pick and roll. When he did run them. He's just got an extremely high ceiling, and as long as he can manage all the off court stuff, he's going to reach it. Then you take a look at Kenyon Martin Jr. and Jayshawn Tate, both guys that they found on the scraps, right? KJ was what was he, like the 55th pick in the draft last year? Jayshawn Tate was undrafted, right? Jayshawn Tate, 25 years old, coming from overseas. Both guys that were fighting for roster spots, right? KJ Martin was pretty intriguing. He shot decently well from three. Excuse me. Big body, freakish athleticism on both ends of the floor. Really more of a roll man on offense and more of a miniature rim protector on defense. He's going to give you some highlight plays with his athleticism. And he should be able to move around a little bit. I mean, he doesn't have great foot speed on the defensive end, but he should be able to switch out onto the perimeter guards sometimes and be able to guard them from time to time. Very, very intriguing piece moving forward. He's a bench player, really. He'll come in and give you good spot minutes for this Houston Rockets team. But, he's an intriguing player moving forward, and hopefully he develops into a starting caliber player for them. You look at Jayshawn Tate, not a good shooter, not really that intriguing on the offensive end, but defensively, decently big body, can guard a multitude of positions. You can guard twos, some threes, maybe some ones. I think he's big enough to play small ball for sometimes. I know that Houston didn't really need him to do that last year, but considering the fact that they have, again, KJ Martin, as well as Christian Wood, but I think he could definitely be experimented at the small ball forward position. Not really a shooter. Again, I like KJ Martin much more than Jayshawn Tate, just because Jayshawn Tate is already up there in age and he's not really that much of a shooter. But again, three bright spots for Houston, as well as Christian Wood, right? A guy they signed for. Christian Wood's free agency last year was pretty puzzling to me. I don't know why Detroit did not just re-sign him, but 21-9 Christian Wood put up, all-star consideration, shot well from three considering his position. Great role man, and just a modern day big man, right? A modern day star big man, right? Just he offers so much versatility on the offensive end, right? He can space the floor, he can roll to the basket. He's got soft touch with his post-ups. He posted up a lot more in Houston this season, and he was pretty effective on them, I thought. He hit a good percentage of his post-ups this season. He's an all-star caliber player, right? The only problem with Christian Wood is that he is 26 years old, and on the defensive end, he's not a positive on the defensive end. He can't. You would think that with his mobility, he would be able to switch out onto the perimeter, but he just can't. Wasn't really that good at it last year with Houston. His IQ on that end of the floor is not all that high. I mean, he has rim protecting capabilities, shot blocking capabilities, but it's not all 100%, right? You like to see him next year take another step in putting it all together. But he's definitely, an intriguing prospect who, keep in mind, he's at this point, Christian Wood isn't really a prospect. He is 26 years old, but given his experience and whatnot, he is technically still a prospect, but, this is the prime of his career. But all in all, a disappointing season just because of how poorly the James Harden trade was handled. But, Kevin Porter Jr., Jayshawn Tate, KJ Martin, and Christian Wood, there were some bright spots for Houston, and, they have some pieces to build around going forward. Now we move on to their offseason goals. Number one is to establish their core players, right? As we previously talked about, their four young guys. Establish which of those guys are truly part of your core and which ones are just pieces moving forward, right? For example, Kevin Porter Jr. is part of their core, right? He is their best prospect going forward until we see who they select with that number 2 pick. Jayshawn Tate, again, I wouldn't really put him in this young core just because of his age, his lack of ability on the offensive end, right? He's a solid defender, but he's not somebody that you're not gonna not trade for people or bring in certain draft prospects just because they would play the same position as Jayshawn Tate, for example, right? I don't value Jayshawn Tate. He's not exactly that young core level of player. While I do think KJ Martin can be that level of player, right? Just because of how intriguing he is on both sides of the floor, really, as we previously talked about. Excuse me, and Christian Wood. Uh, Christian Wood is very interesting because I think that if Houston can get a decent trade package for him, right, a young player in a first, I think they have to take that in a heartbeat just because of how old Christian Wood is already. And you have to keep in mind that by the time Houston is ready to contend, how old will Christian Wood be and how good will he be really? Because these are, again, the prime years of his career. So we're talking about 3-4 years down the road when Houston's actually ready to contend for a playoff spot. How good is Christian Wood going to be at that point in time? And is it worth just getting the best package you can while he's at his best? That's the way I would move. So with keeping that in mind, my core for Houston right now is Kevin Porter Jr., KJ Martin, and whoever the players that they select with their 3 picks in the first round coming up this year. I would not include Jayshawn Tate, and I would look to move Christian Wood if I could. Moving on to their second goal for me, which is to explore trade options for veterans under contract, right? We're talking about, at first I was like, maybe they could look to trade John Wall. But I don't know. I don't think anybody's going to really trade for John Wall. I really meant the other guys on the roster, right? You look at an Eric Gordon, right? We've seen the rumors floating around of Tyler Hero and a second for Eric Gordon. I mean, I'd take that deal in a heartbeat. Maybe somebody like the Clippers could trade for him. The only problem is his large contract, right? You'd have to be trading him to a situation where that team is ready to contend, and they could give you a second or a late first, and maybe a end of the bench young player, right? You could look at the LA, maybe Kuzma, Horton Tucker for Eric Gordon. I mean, is that a fair trade? I mean, I think it's a fair trade. An intriguing prospect. I mean, Taylor Horton Tucker is not really worth that much. And then Kyle Kuzma, a solid young role player for Eric Gordon, right? A guy who can give you 16, 15 points per game. I think that's worth it for LA if their goal is to push all their chips in to become, take that next step as championship contenders, right? You look at a DJ Augustine. He could see some value on the trade market, right? That backup point guard, veteran point guard who could shoot. There would be some teams I think that would be at least take a look at trading for DJ Augustine. I could see the Clippers, depending on what happens with their point guard position. I could definitely see them taking a look at DJ Augustine. Excuse me. And Avery Bradley, right? Avery Bradley, another, again, a decent wing, hasn't been what he was since he was in Boston, as we all remember with those Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder days. They could look to move Avery Bradley. I think a second. You could obtain a second or maybe a late first for Avery Bradley, depending on the team. I could see a team like the Clippers trading for him. I could see a team like the Bucks trading for Avery Bradley. I think he would be pretty valuable in Milwaukee, considering you look at their lack of guard depth, not necessarily, and point guard depth, really, because, I mean, they don't really have a point guard. Without Dante DiVincenzo, their only 2 guard that they're really playing is Pat Connaughton. I think that they could use a player like Avery Bradley, a guy who could come in, give you solid defensive minutes as well as some floor spacing capabilities. And then number 3, which is most important to me, right? Continue to add talent through draft capital, right? These 3 picks coming up for Houston are so valuable. They need to make sure they hit it. And, moving forward, they still don't have that blue chip prospect, right? They don't have that number 1 guy to build around. And this year's draft haul for them gives them that opportunity to add that player. Now, whether it's Evan Mobley or Jalen Green, we'll get to that later. But, they need to hit on this year's draft, right? They need to hit on it, because if they hit on this year's draft, their rebuild is moved forward. Their timetable moves forward exponentially, right? If they obtain that prospect that they can build around moving forward, it takes off pressure from KPJ. It takes off pressure from Christian Wood if they keep him. It takes pressure off of KG Martin, as well as who they select with that 23rd and 24th pick. That is essential, right? And obtaining and if they can obtain more draft capital, especially in this year's class where it is just so talented, that will do wonders for Houston. And number 4, I have find low risk, high reward players in free agency, right? They don't have a lot of money to work with, but I think finding, young guys that haven't worked out in previous situations that they could pick up for cheap, I think that's what Houston needs to look for in order to fill out their roster, right? But these are all goals. As you look at all these goals, nothing really crazy, right? It's just taking those next steps in rebuilds, right? Offloading your veterans who you can trade for draft capital, or maybe a young player, right? Late firsts, early seconds, continue to add talent through the draft. And then you look for young players in free agency that haven't worked out, right? This is Houston taking the next step in their rebuild, right? This is them continuing to add talent, add young talent, right? Add more picks, establish the guys that you want to keep and you don't want to keep, and move forward with that, right? That's what Houston needs to do to take their next step, and that's what they should look to do in this offseason. Next, we move on to the salary cap. Again, as it states there, this is pre the draft and free agency. And just taking a look at their contracts that are on the board. As previously mentioned, John Wall will not be traded at all this offseason, just given how poor of production he put up last year. Given that contract, $44 million for John Wall, that's just ridiculous. It really shows the flaws in the Supermax extension rules. That's just a ludicrous amount of money to be paying a player like John Wall. They're going to have to deal with that contract for the next 2 years. There's nothing Houston can really do about it. Even as a player option on 30, John Wall's not going anywhere. John Wall is not going anywhere. We took a look at Eric Gordon, as previously mentioned. Contenders could take a look at him. The only problem with Eric Gordon is that he's making that much amount of money, right? We remember back in the day with Houston, we say that as if it wasn't 2-3 years ago, where Houston just needed to keep that core group of players together, and they just had to overpay for Eric Gordon in order to keep him, right? And now we're looking at, I wouldn't say Eric Gordon is untradeable, but at $18 million for how old he is, Houston might need to give up a second-round pick or two in order to trade Eric Gordon. But I definitely think right around the trade deadline, I think you could definitely see some contenders take a look at him. I think he's definitely still worth it, right? Valuable player, spaces the floor. I think he had his moments. He's always had his moments defensively, right? Given his size, and in the playoffs, he always put forth an effort, right? But really, you're looking at Eric Gordon for his scoring capabilities, right? His ability to space the floor and his ability to create on ball. Again, I think it seemed like the Clippers could take a look at him. I think Houston, he would be very valuable for them. Even a team, Milwaukee, I could see Philly definitely trading for him. Any contender that needs really shooting and shot creation should definitely take a look at Mr. Eric Gordon. The only problem is, again, that contract. The team that would be trading for Eric Gordon would need to be giving up a large contract in return, ideally an expiring one. But I think an Eric Gordon trade is a little tricky, but not impossible. Again, we take a look at DJ Augustine. We'll skip over Christian Wood for a second. You take a look at DJ Augustine at that $7 million. $7 million is definitely a high price to be paying for a backup point guard, especially one where DJ Augustine is, not the best backup point guard. But still, again, a guy who could space the floor, not giving you anything defensively. We all know what DJ Augustine is, right? He's a guy who could come in, run your offense, settle it down, bring that veteran presence, right? Can space the floor, a little bit of shot creation, no defense though. So we all know what DJ Augustine can bring. Again, if a contender would need a backup point guard, or really maybe a young team that just needs that veteran presence, I wouldn't even mind Houston holding on to DJ Augustine if they wanted to, keep that veteran presence in house. Have him be a young leader in this locker room, because we all know John Wall is not that leader. I think it would not be a bad decision to keep DJ Augustine. He's gone through some torture years with Orlando, as he was there. He was definitely their best point guard option a couple years back. But DJ Augustine, I would definitely look to trade him, but I wouldn't be opposed to them keeping him. At that $7 million price range, some teams might be scared away from trading for him. But, I definitely think there's definitely a team that'll trade for DJ Augustine. We take a look at Christian Wood's contract. Christian Wood, with his age, right, 26 in the prime of his career, as we previously mentioned, and making just around $13.5 million per year. That's insane value. That is insane value. I could definitely see teams trading for Christian Wood, teams that need a big man. Again, going back to the Clippers, I mean, would you give up Terrence Mann, maybe one of their contracts, whenever they have a pick for? I'm pretty sure they can start trading picks this offseason. Would you do that for Christian Wood? Is that enough to get Christian Wood? Maybe not. Just spitballing here. But I definitely think, Christian Wood at that contract, team should definitely reach out. And I think they will about his trade availability. Just because, again, you take a look at Houston's timetable, you doubt that Christian Wood will be putting up the same level of production as he is now, compared to when Houston is actually ready to compete. Avery Bradley, again, $5 million for Avery Bradley. Like DJ Augustine, that's a little bit pricey. But teams will definitely take a look at him. I'm sure Houston can get an offer for Avery Bradley, and as mentioned here, it's a team option, so they should definitely pick it up and look to trade him as soon as they can. Daniel House, again, a value player at $4 million, just about $4 million. Daniel House, solid role player, shoot the ball, play some defense. We all know about Daniel House. I think he's a value player. I would hold on to him personally. I would not look to trade Daniel House. Now, I think you could get more for Daniel House than you would DJ Augustine or Avery Bradley, but he's a valuable piece to this Houston team that desperately needs shooting. So I would definitely hold on to him. And then you took a look at the rest of their young core, right? Kevin Porter Jr. making only $1.7 million, right? Jason Tate, 1.5. Kenyon Martin, 1.5. Michael Frazier is end of the bench player. And Kyrie Thomas, an intriguing guard that they signed. Can't really shoot. I wasn't really sure why they really signed him. But, maybe he can show something off the bench for this team. Now we move on to the most important part of Houston's offseason, in my opinion, which is who they select in this upcoming draft. Now, to start off, Houston has 3 picks this year, the 2nd pick, the 23rd pick, and the 24th pick. Now, this is prior to any transactions that are possible with their veterans. But, again, they have the 2nd pick, 23rd pick, and 24th pick. Now, we're going to start off with the 2nd pick. With the 2nd pick, I think there's only 2 people in play, right? And that's Evan Mobley and Jalen Green. Now, some people would pick Jalen Green. I think a lot of people would pick Jalen Green, actually, right? I think he could potentially fit with KPJ. I think they're both mainly scorers. Now, I would definitely bet on Jalen Green reaching his ceiling before Kevin Porter Jr. But, I mean, I think they're similar players that could play together, right? Just because of Kevin Porter Jr.'s playmaking abilities. And you definitely select the best player in the draft, right? And if the Rockets front office thinks that if the Rockets front office thinks that Jalen Green is the best prospect on the board at number 2, then they should definitely go ahead and do that, right? But for me personally, I take Evan Mobley, right? Just because you look at how valuable his skill set is in today's NBA, right? A big man who could switch 1 through 5 on the defensive end. Legitimately switch 1 through 5, and he legitimately switched 1 through 5 in college, right? That is insane. That is crazy to think about. I can't really think of another draft prospect besides maybe Jaren Jackson Jr. that had that same defensive capability, as well as being a rim protector and having a high IQ on that level. That's insane, right? If that skill set is able to translate to the NBA, Evan Mobley's going to be a star. A star, no doubt, if those defensive traits transfer, right? Because you look at how valuable that is in today's NBA, right? Especially in the playoffs, right? We just took a look at Rudy Gobert, I'm a fan of Rudy Gobert, and I think that a large part of why Utah failed is because their lack of perimeter defense, right? All other four guys on the court with him besides really Royce O'Neal were poor defenders, but again, he wasn't able to guard the perimeter all that well because he was worried about protecting the rim, protecting his teammates' mistakes, and they were expecting him to go and cover cover shooters in the corners as well, right? And that's just really not his game, right? And it made it worse, right? You look at DeAndre Ayton, right? A much more versatile big. Look at what he's doing in the playoffs. So you take that versatility even a step forward with Evan Mobley, right? He would never be unplayable in the playoffs just because of how versatile he is on the defensive end. And then on offense, with his playmaking capabilities at that size, his scoring capabilities at that size, right? His jump shot potential. He's got a nice form, great touch for a big man. I think he's gonna have problems posting up early in his career before he really starts to put on weight. But regardless, he's still, the potential is there, right? Evan Mobley, he has the potential to be a big man who can score inside, space the floor, and be really a defensive player of the year with his skill set. I mean, I think that's just more valuable than what Jalen Green would be giving you, simply because, the biggest praise for Jalen Green is that he's going to be a 20 to 25 point per game scorer, right? That's what we describe Jalen Green as, right? A scorer. Well, how valuable is that scoring really, right? If let's say Jalen Green does reach, 23, 24 points per game, like 3, 4 assists, maybe like 4 or 5 rebounds, and is average at best on defense. How valuable is that really, right? We've seen that, with guys like Zach LaVine, Devin Booker, right? Trae Young, even Karl-Anthony Towns at the big man position. We've seen it in other players before where we call them, well, Trae Young is stat padding, right? Oh, well, Devin Booker's stat padding. He's not a good defender. He's doing it on a bad team, right? So do the stats really matter, right? Zach LaVine. Oh, well, even though he's putting up 27 points per game on great efficiency, he's doing it on a horrible team, right? He doesn't really play all that much defense. It's not really contributing to winning, right? So how valuable is what Jalen Green is doing, right? And I'm not saying that level of player is not valuable. It's definitely highly valuable, right? You need those kind of guys to build a team, especially a championship level team, right? But I think it's easier to build around a player with Evan Mobley just because you have a defensive identity, right? And I think Evan Mobley is that level of defender where you can afford to have guys around him that aren't positive impact defensive players. Well, as Jalen Green, I think you need to find positive impact defenders as well as a playmaker, as well as, your usual 3-and-D role players, right? So I think Evan Mobley is just easier to build around. I think his skill set is much more valuable in today's NBA. Not saying that Jalen Green is not going to pan out, because I personally love Jalen Green as a prospect. And I'm not saying there's no way for sure that Evan Mobley will be better than Jalen Green. He might not even be better than Jalen Green, and they both might pan out to be stars. But I would definitely take Evan Mobley over Jalen Green just because of how valuable his skill set is, and just because he's easier to build around. Now we take a look at this 23rd pick. And really at the 23rd, 24th pick, these are all, I could have grouped them all, right? All 6 players, just because it's back-to-back picks. But, I think depending on who they take at 2, and depending on the direction that Houston goes, would determine these next 2 picks. So we're just going to skim through these players really quick. Usman Garuba, a lot of people have him in the lottery. An amazing defensive prospect, great size, great athleticism, great speed, great IQ, amazing hustle at that side of the floor. He's going to get minutes right away in the NBA wherever he goes just because of how high of an impact he's going to have on the defensive end, right? He's going to hustle, block shots, guard multiple positions. He's going to be a menace on that side of the floor. Now, offensively, he's really a rim-rolling big at this point, and he's only about 6'8", 6'9", so, I mean, he's not going to be able to space the floor at that size. I mean, they already really have that in KJ Martin, but if he does fall this late in the draft, which I project he will just because of his lack of floor spacing, I think this will be a value add for Houston, and they can take his jump shot as a project. You look at Jaden Springer, combo guard coming out of Tennessee, went to IMG his for high school. Um, Jaden Springer, I used to think a lot highly of him. Um, he lacks high end athleticism. His jump shot, I think, does need work. He has playmaking capabilities, and he's shown flashes of being able to create for himself. But he's really a role player, solid role player who can space the floor. Defensively, I think he can guard both guard positions. I think he has good weight on his frame, but I think he could definitely get a little stronger. He's really going to be a role player, right? A high role player, and he's been playing with high level competition his whole life, right? He played with former fellow draft prospect and most likely lottery pick in Keon Johnson in college. He played with guys like Amando Beckett, Josh Green, Noah Farrakhan at IMG. So he's always been playing with talent, right? He knows how to fit in, get it done, fill out his role. And I'm sure he's going to be a high value. I'm sure he's not a high value, but he's going to be a value role player wherever he goes. And I think he would be a great fit in Houston, especially just because of he could come in, passive, right? He's very passive on the offensive end, which I think is one of the knocks on him because I think he does have the potential to, get his, and he just doesn't look to do that as often as he should. But I think he could come in, fit next to KPJ, space the floor for him, play make for him sometimes. He could do the same thing for Jalen Green as well, and learn from guys like John Wall and DJ Augustine. Ayo Dosunmu I have as the third look for the 23rd pick. I don't think he should go here just because of how old he is. I think he's ready to compete now. But if Houston does want, that older prospect that's ready to go now, which I would not pick if I were them, but, just covering all options here. Ayo Dosunmu would be there. Combo guard for Illinois. Two-way player. Good defender. He can shoot, but I don't know. I'm a big doubter in how much that shot will translate to the NBA level, right? I'm not a big fan on Ayo Dosunmu's shot. He's a good slasher, a great defender. He was a junior, so he's not really as young as guys like Jaden Springer or Usman Garuba. But, he's going to come in and be a day one impact player, right? He's going to be bringing youth. He's going to be bringing opposite of youth. He's going to be bringing veteranship from a rookie, right? He's been playing in Illinois. He's been playing in some big stages, given how good of a program Illinois is. So he's going to come in and impact Houston day one, right? If they just need that hustle guard who can slash, then they would go with Ayo Dosunmu. But I think they could definitely find their free agency. I would definitely not pick Ayo Dosunmu if I was them. But moving on to their 24th pick, Roko Prkačin. I would definitely pick Roko Prkačin here if I was Houston. An overseas player, big body, about 6'9", 6'10". Great footwork, great speed for his size. I think his swing skill is definitely his shot. If the shot hits, then he's going to be one hell of a player. He has great playmaking potential for his size. Versatile on the defensive end, given his mobility at that 6'9", 6'10" frame. He really moves around much smaller than his size, right? And that's very intriguing, very young. Hustles a lot on the defensive end. He had a lot of big-time blocks, chase-down blocks overseas. He's a decent post player, and he has great IQ, great vision for his size. He had a lot of good looks out of the post, and a lot of times he served as a rim-rolling big, and he attacked off closeouts. I think that's the role you could have him in, right? Big body, and he would bring something that this Houston Rockets team doesn't have now, which is positional versatility, right? Roko Prkačin, I think his swing skill is definitely his shooting ability, but if he can be a 35% three-point shooter, right? A guy who can attack off close-offs, hit the open man, right? Make some intriguing passes here and then, and hustle on the defensive end at that 6'9", 6'10" size. I mean, that's a value add, especially here at pick 24, where I personally have him much higher on my big board, but this would be a value add at 24. Nashawn Highland, a guy who's been climbing up big boards a lot recently, given his explosion at the draft combine. Right, Emmanuel Quickly-esque, great shooter, great handle, great burst. Would come in and give them some 3-point shot creation, which is a skill that this Houston Rockets team could definitely add. Not much on the defensive end. Very skinny. Needs to continue to add muscle to his frame. But he's an intriguing player, right? He should come in and add 3-point shot creation to a team that desperately needs 3-point shot creation. And then the last player that I have that I think they should look at is Quentin Grimes, right? A guy who would be staying home, right? He attended Houston most recently. An All-American a couple years back that has bounced around in college, but finally found his footing. Big body, a junior who could come in and give them shot creation. Quentin Grimes is a bit older, and I'm not sure how much I buy his 3-point shot. His form is a little bit funky with the way his offhand kind of like peers out when he shoots. He kind of goes like this with like his offhand. It's kind of funky, but the shots were going in, especially at the combine. He was red hot there. Not sure how much that'll translate again, but big body who's going to be able to defend at an NBA level. I think he would be a value add, good role player for this Houston team. Personally, again, my picks would be Evan Mobley with the 2nd pick. I would pick Jaden Springer with the 23rd pick, and I would pick Roko Prokachin with the 24th pick, just to add, space. With those packages, you would be adding your franchise player in Evan Mobley, right? You would be adding full floor spacing with Jaden Springer, and you would be adding positional versatility with Roko Prokachin, right? Taking that next step towards adding positional versatility, which all 3 players would give you, which is highly valuable in today's NBA. Next, we move on to potential free agents. Now, as previously mentioned, Houston should just be looking to add low-risk, high-reward players, right? Especially since they're going to be bringing in 3 prospects, given their 3 picks that we just covered. End of the roster guys, really guys to just add some depth to the roster. Nothing crazy right here. These are all young guys that I've mentioned that, whether they stay with their team or not, they could definitely add value to Houston. Again, these are all low-risk, high-reward players, right? Harry Giles, a guy who hasn't worked out really since his high school days. Injured his senior year, injured at Duke, didn't work out with Sacramento, didn't work out with Portland. Give him another chance. Be another big man on the roster with Evan Mobley or Christian Wood, depending on what happens there. But he would come in and be your backup big. If he could stay healthy, he would definitely be a value add, be a two-way presence, right? A decent defender, and a solid force inside the paint. Hamidou Diallo, an athletic body. I think his shot has gotten incrementally better as the years have gone on, right? I still wouldn't label him as a floor spacer, but his shot has definitely gotten better. His playmaking definitely got better in Detroit, I thought, and he's always going to hustle on the defensive end, right? Depending on who they draft with those later 2 picks and how their 2-guard spot is looking, I think Hamidou Diallo would be a value add. Terrence Davis, right? Playing for Sacramento, right? Before he faced those domestic charges last year, but still a sniper, a 3-point sniper. I think he could come in and be an extreme value add. If I was Houston, I would definitely look to throw $6.5 million for 2 years, $13 million. Terrence Davis's way, just because how much they need. I think one underrated part of Houston's roster needs for this upcoming season is definitely spot up 3-point shot creation. I think Terrence Davis will come in and add that. And I think they should throw again. I think $13 million for 2 years is a solid deal for Terrence Davis. Now, whether or not Sacramento matches that, who knows? Sacramento is another crapshoot of a franchise, but I think Terrence Davis would definitely be a value add for this Houston Rockets team. Ignas Brzezzinski, a personal favorite of mine. I'm a diehard Knicks fan. I never thought he got a fair shot. Dominated the G League. He spaced the floor. He can create for his teammates, right? He could create his own shot as well. I think he would be a value add. I don't think he's ever been given really a fair shot in the NBA. The Knicks never really gave him a roster shot. Why? Or a true roster shot. Why? I don't know. Obviously he wasn't gonna get that many minutes in Philly. But with Houston, if they would have signed him, I think he would come in and he could compete for a roster spot right away. And if he were to get it, I think he would definitely be a value add. Given again his playmaking, his floor spacing abilities, and as well as his on-ball creative abilities. He's not really a defender at all. Moving on to Louis King, we're just gonna cover these guys really quick because again they're just bottom of the barrel free agents really. Louis King, New Jersey native like me, went to Hudson Catholic, had an up and down career at Oregon, really been bouncing around the NBA. All right, he was with Detroit, went undrafted in 2019, signed with Detroit. He played decently well. He played with the Westchester Knicks, as we see right here, and most recently he's been playing with the Kings. Big body, 6'7", 22 years old, who can space the floor. I mean, that's intriguing, right? He would again give Houston more positionless versatility, which I think this roster definitely needs. Again, he's 22 years old, space the floor, not much of a defender, but again, give him a shot. I think they should definitely give him a shot at that 3-4 position. Trey Lyles, just a 4, really, space the floor, right? If they keep if Christian Wood stays at the 5, and you would really have KJ Martin, and you really have no other 4. Maybe they draft Garuba or Pakachin, but then Trey Lyles, add more depth, right? Shooting, that's really all it is. Chris Dunn, I think he could be a value add depending on where they go with their guard spots. I think if they need defense, Chris Dunn could definitely be that. Maybe he can revitalize his career with Houston. And then finally, Austin Rivers, right? Just veteran presence. He probably wouldn't sign with Houston, but given their history. But, maybe they could throw some money at him. He could be a valuable floor spacer for them, right? A guy who could give them some shot creation. Just really shooting, just off-ball shooting. I think that's really what they need to look to add with free agents. But yeah, again, all low risk, high reward guys for Houston, and definitely guys like Chris Dunn and Austin Rivers, where if they hit, they could definitely look to trade them at the deadline for future assets. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Again, Houston, right? Not in the best situation, but with their draft capital, with the players that they have on the roster, and potential moves that they can make with trading veterans, there's worse spots to be in as far as rebuild goes. I think that they'll be fine next year. Next year's going to be continuing to develop the young guys, and Steven Silas is a great coach. I think he'll get it done. And Houston, you guys have a bright future. So thank you so much for watching, guys. This is my first video. I appreciate if you guys can like and subscribe, share it with a friend. Gonna be going through all NBA teams. So next video is gonna be about the Detroit Pistons. So please, again, thank you so much for watching. It means so much for my first video. Share and subscribe. Like and subscribe, and share the video to a friend. Thank you so much, and hope you guys have a great day. Take care.